another demonstration. This time, how to do a simple screen replacement using some basic motion tracking with the corner pin effect, and then also how to do some basic rotoscoping, how to get started cutting stuff out from video so you can create composited video shots. All right, so you can see I've got a video clip here of a tablet, and I've added some stickers to the corners of the screen to make this task easier, and it's definitely easier if you do that. And in this example, I'm going to be adding some random stuff onto the screen here, and of course getting it to match the movement in the shot. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start from scratch here. I'll make a new project, and I'm going to import my source clip, and I'm going to add the source clip to a new composition that matches the settings. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm going to create a solid layer to use as a placeholder for my screen replacement, and I'll replace it with other stuff later on. So I'm just going to make a solid color layer. Doesn't really matter what color. I'll just make a bright red layer, make it the comp size. And there we go. So we have two layers. So this is a basic motion tracking task. Our movie layer here at the bottom is going to be our motion source, and our solid red layer here is going to be the motion target. I'll go ahead and turn that layer off for right now. And just like the other motion tracking examples that I've done, we start by selecting the layer, we go to animation, we go to track motion. Now in this case, though, it's not a basic transformation track. We need four track points, basically, one for each corner of the screen. So if we click in the tracker control here where it says track type, changing it from transform to one of the corner pin options. And the difference between the two is whether you want to be able to control 3 or 4 of the pins. So generally speaking, for doing a screen replacement, you're going to want to use the perspective corner pin. So you have control over all 4 of the corners. It doesn't keep the two sides parallel. All right, so this is kind of like I showed in the other demonstration with the corner pin effect. You know, this is going to enable us to force the perspective of the layer that it's applied to. Now to set this up, just like our other motion tracking examples, we're going to move each of the track points, and in this case, we're going to put one in each corner over the stickers. So if I click within each of the track points and drag the entire track point, all 3 components of it, to that location. Now remember, each track point has 3 components. If we zoom in here and take a closer look at one of them, just to review here, each track point has an attach point in the center, which in this case is going to determine where the corner of our target layer is going to end up. And then it has a feature area, which is the group of pixels you're telling it to look for. So you want to set that up over something that's easy to locate. And then the search area, which is the area it's going to analyze on the next frame, looking for that feature area. So you want to scrub the time marker and see how fast or how far away those pixels are moving, where they're going to be on the next frame. In this case, pretty easy example, they're not moving very far, so the search area doesn't need to be that big. The default sizes are actually probably pretty good here. I might make them just a little bit bigger. And in this case, I'm going to move the attach points so that the edges of my layer that I apply it to are going to completely cover up the, the old screen underneath. You know, sometimes a little tricky to click on these things, but if you zoom in close and take a look, you should be able to. Now remember, you can hold the space bar down to access the hand tool, so you don't have to change tools in the toolbar to recenter your viewer window. And I'll just finish setting this up here. Now again, this is a fairly easy example. There's nothing that's going to move in front of the screen or anything like that. So once I've set it up, I should be able to just come to the tracker panel here, analyze forward, and it should do a good job of following those stickers that I put on there, and you can see that it does. So it doesn't go astray. I don't need to stop it and correct it or change any of my tracking options to get it to work. It does a pretty good job right away. Now, in this case, I'll go ahead and just scrub back through there, make sure it looks good, and then I'll click Edit Target, tell it to target the other layer. That's my only option in this case. I'll hit OK, hit Apply, and it takes me back to my composition view. Now, at this point, I'll go ahead and look at my layers here, and I'll collapse my layers down, turn the visibility for my red solid layer back on, and if I preview, you can see that the tracker has modified that layer to track with the corners of the screen. So that looks pretty good. Now, how's it doing that? Well, it's doing that by animating the position. In fact, if I hit the U key to reveal keyframes here, you can see it's animating the position of the layer, and it's also added a distortion corner pin effect and animated the four corners of the corner pin to fake the perspective or force the perspective. So that's looking pretty good. Now, let's say though that, I wanted to be able to make some adjustments, like maybe I want to refine the scale or the position of the screen. Maybe I want to, nudge it up a little bit or something like that. But I don't want to mess up any of this tracking work that I've now applied. So I want to introduce you to the transform effect. If we go to the effect menu, go to distort, and add a transform effect, what that'll do is it'll give us an effect with an anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and some other properties that we can use to transform our layer without affecting any of the transform animation that we may have already done. So it's basically giving us a fresh set of transform properties that we can use to transform our layer without throwing off any animation that we've already done. Now, in this case, I do want these transformations to be composited ahead of the corner pin so it doesn't throw off the location of the corners. So I move that transform effect above my corner pin effect. Keep in mind, After Effects composites from top to bottom, just like in your timeline area. Layers that are on top are composited above layers that are underneath. The same with effects. Effects that are on top are composited ahead of effects that are underneath them. So the order that the effects are stacked up in is a factor. Now that I've moved it, I can go ahead and adjust my scale here. I'll uncheck the uniform scale. And so now I can easily adjust my scale height, scale width, without throwing off any of the tracking work that I've already done. Or if I needed to offset the position a little bit, I could use the position property here to fix that. And, if there was any drift to the movement, I could animate the position here. So adding a transform effect is a great way to be able to refine the work that you've done without throwing off any of the registration. Okay, I'll go ahead and preview that, and that looks like it's locked on there pretty good. Now, obviously the thumbs are an issue, and I'm going to come to that in the second part of this demonstration. But to finish this up, at least the tracking part of it, and replace what's on the screen, I'm now going to take the solid layer. I'm going to do a layer pre-compose. So layer, pre-compose, and leave the attributes right where they are. So all of the tracking keyframes, the transformation work that I've done is all going to get left in this composition. And what this is going to do is it's going to take the red solid and it's going to move it to a new composition, which I'm going to call screen or screen contents. So this is basically going to create sort of a shell, if you will, where anything that's inside the shell will be on the screen. See, the keyframes and everything I've done are all left right where they are. That's what the leave attributes option did. But if I go into that pre-comp that was just created, the red solid layer is now isolated by itself. And so now I can import other assets, or I can create things to add to the screen. So in this example, I have another piece of stock footage here that I'll just drag in and drop it into that comp. And maybe I'll grab my type tool and, make a text layer as well. And the point being, anything that I add to this composition is gonna be on the screen back out in the main composition. So, if I make some text, or maybe I make some shapes with my shape tool, and anything that's going on in this pre-comp here, when we come back out here to the main comp, it's going to be added to the screen. So this is a great way to start with a placeholder and then pre-compose it, leaving the attributes, and then you've basically got a pre-comp where you can add anything you want onto that screen without having to redo any of your tracking. Now, to finish up this part of the demo, I'm just going to add some effects to the screen layer here to kind of match the treatment to the background, okay? Because we're mixing together different footage of different qualities, and it really stands out that it is, sharper, more saturated, more contrasty than the background movie that it's composited on top of. So I'll start with some color correction. I'll select my layer, go to Effect, Color Correction, and I'll do a levels adjustment. So just like I might do in Photoshop here, I'll do a levels adjustment to take the black point and kind of wash things out a bit. See, I can lighten the black point so it's not quite as contrasty, and that's going to match better with the background footage. Okay, so you could do levels, you can do color balance, any of the color correction effects that you're comfortable with. I might do a hue and saturation and pull the saturation down a little bit too. Again, trying to match to the background better. And then I might blur it out a little bit. The background footage is a bit more blurry, so I might add a blur and sharpen Gaussian blur effect, and then, throw the blur up a little bit here just to kind of throw it out of focus a little bit. Now another tip, if I wanted to soften the edge of the screen itself, what I could do would be go to Layer, Mask, New Mask, and add a rectangular mask around that layer. And then if I open up the mask group here, I can use the mask expansion value here to contract or expand my edge, and I can use the feather value to soften it. See, so if you want to be able to soften the edge of your layer, adding a mask to the overall layer by choosing Layer, Mask, New Mask, and then using the mask expansion and mask feather properties, will do that. So I can soften the edge of the screen nicely. Now, of course, when I do that and I contract it in, it's kind of revealing the old edge around the edges there. So I'm going to go back to that transform effect and scale things up a little bit. So again, you can see the value of having this transform effect on the layer there in a case like this when we're compositing. All right, that looks pretty good. Now the last effect, or one of the last effects I should say, that I'll add here is going to be a grain effect, because the background footage, if we take a look at it, it's very grainy. We zoom in here and take a look there, for example. You can see there's quite a bit of graininess going on that isn't present on the screen. So with the screen layer still selected, I'll do Effect, Noise and Grain, and I'll do the Add Grain effect. And then in the Add Grain effect, though, you do have to change the View Mode option from Preview to Final Output so that it's adding the graininess, not just in this white square area, but to the whole layer. The reason it does that is, add grain can really slow your previewing and rendering times down, so you may want to keep it set to preview area only, make your adjustments like the intensity and so forth, and then when you're ready to render, change it to final output so that it renders out to the rest of the layer. Now in this case, the default settings are pretty good. When you do add grain, though, you should load up a preview and kind of give it an eye for the speed that it's, kind of animating at. In the animation subcategory here, there is an animation speed value. So if you do need to slow it down a little bit or speed it up, you can adjust that value. And so by adding grain, we can kind of match the look of the background a little bit better. I think a value of maybe about 1.5 there for the intensity is good in this case. That looks pretty good. So those are the effects I would probably add on there to kind of match the treatment. Like I said, some color correction, some blur, and some grain. Now beyond that, you might want to experiment with adding things like glow, or in this case, I might do like a light sweep effect to the screen to give it like kind of a light treatment. Under effect, generate, I might do light sweep, which adds kind of a light, glisten, and I can tweak the angle and placement of that. Play around with the edge settings here, edge thickness, and sweep width and so forth. So, this could be a way to add kind of a lighting treatment to the surface of the screen too, which might look good. Like I said, you can experiment with glow effects, and there's other ways of doing that too, using solid layers and masks. But that looks pretty good. I'll go with that. So the last part of this is going to be rotoscoping out the thumbs from the background and placing them above our screen replacement. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and then I will continue and show the rotoscoping part of this.